I am beyond excited to be with Nicolass, who I think actually a lot of folks on the call probably know if you've either done Ship 30 or just have come across Nicolass's work. I think we're going to orient a lot of the conversation around like being strategic with distribution. We'll dive a little bit into editing and really being thoughtful with what you're trying to write, who you're trying to reach, how you can do that with maximum kind of effectiveness. But Nicolass, there's already a ton of stuff on your background that people can go and find, but maybe you could give the 30 to 60 seconds short version of that, and then we'll kick things off.
All right, I'll do the nutshell bio. Was a pro gamer as a teenager, World of Warcraft player. Funny chapter of my life, wrote a book about it. And I had one of the first big famous gaming blogs on the internet. So as a 17-year-old, I had 10,000 people reading my gaming blog every day. That exposed me to the power of the internet, changed the way I thought about everything from there. When I was in college, I got really into bodybuilding. And after college, I started writing on a website called Quora. I graduated with a degree in fiction writing. All of my teachers basically said, have fun being a poor writer for the rest of your life, and said, you're just going to work at a coffee shop. And that's just how it is being a writer. And I hated that answer. So I started writing on Quora with the challenge of I'm going to write an answer every day for a year and see what happens. And about 3 months in, I had this answer go viral. I posted a before and after picture with it. Me as a really scrawny teenager, didn't know I had celiac disease till I was 18, looked like a skeleton. And then me on the right as a bodybuilder, I looked like I had eaten my former self and 80 pounds heavier and shredded. And the answer went viral, million views in 48 hours, front page of Reddit. And that introduced me. That's how I wrote my first ebook series, which was like a fitness ebook based on all these questions people were asking. What's your routine? What are you eating? You know, how did you have the commitment and the discipline to do that for so long? And that was my first product, my first ebook, my first time making $1 on the internet. That was a really transformative experience for me at 24. And then from there, I wrote every day on Quora for a year, became the #1 most read writer on Quora out of 200 million users in 2015. I was one of the first writers there to figure out that Quora was syndicating with major publications. So meaning to build their own credibility in SEO, they were taking Quora answers and republishing them on Inc. magazine or Forbes or Time or Fortune or whatever. So I started studying what pieces were getting syndicated and then tweaking my writing style on Quora to match what they were syndicating. And I had 100 plus answers syndicated by every major publication on the internet. And from there, I ended up launching a company called Digital Press, which was a ghostwriting agency for executives and founders and investors, basically using just my process of talk to people on the phone, record the call, turn the call into a transcript, edit the transcript down into a piece. And we scaled that business to 20 full-time employees and a couple million in revenue in about 18 months. And then from there, I just keep writing on the internet. Anything writing and the internet, to me, that's my intersection. Now I share a lot of what I've learned over the past 10 years. I wrote a book about it called The Art and Business of Online Writing, building this writing challenge group with another gentleman named Dickie Bush called Ship 30 for 30. And yeah, now I'm more in the business of helping other writers now learn and avoid a lot of the mistakes and things that took me 10 years to learn. So that's the 2.5-minute bio. And I hope that gives helpful context to what we talk about today.
Yeah, this is great. It gives context on why it was so hard to come up with great questions to ask you, because you have generously shared so much of your knowledge with writing online, with how to really leverage the internet to get your writing read, that I'm going to do my best to ask things that you haven't already written about in depth. I want to start at like the very beginning. Maybe I'm somebody who just joined Ship 30. Maybe I've done some writing before joining, but it never has gotten much traction. What advice or kind of guidance would you give to people who are just trying to get their first like 10 blog posts live or their first 10 pieces of writing live on the internet? How do you find yourself advising those folks?
It's a great question because, again, for context, I've gone through this game multiple times. Like my gaming blog as a teenager was start from zero, build it up. And then that site doesn't exist anymore because that was 12 years ago or whatever, 15 years ago at this point. And then I did it on Quora, new account to the top. And then I did it on Medium, new account into the top. And so after you repeat the same pattern over and over again, you start to look for efficiencies. And that's part of why a lot of the advice that I then give to brand new writers is a little polarizing, because I'm trying to point out that a lot of the things that people feel like are important aren't actually that important in the very beginning. They become important later. But when you're first starting out, like one of the things I tweeted recently, and I've gotten so much response from it because it's a polarizing statement, is I said in your first year of writing, don't worry about editing. Like literally don't feel like you have to make a second draft of anything, because what you're doing is you're essentially trying to edit down something that you don't even really know what you're editing for yet. And so much of my own belief and process in writing on the internet is coming up with an idea, working through that idea, publishing that idea, and then seeing what happens. And it's the seeing what happens part that then informs what's the next idea I come up with, and how do I work through that idea, and how do I publish that idea, and then what happens, and you repeat that. And the biggest mistake that I see is and this happens with like writers that get book deals and really accomplished people in their industry, and I see this with ghostwriting all the time, is people walk into the space of online writing and they think they know what it is people want to hear about from them. And the reality is you don't. You have an assumption. You yourself have made up this story that I think what I am credible to write about is this. And it's not until you go write 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 things that then all of a sudden the data tells you that's something different. So a perfect example is we had this client with digital press that I was ghostwriting for, and he's the CEO of a publicly traded biotech company. Walks into the engagement being like, I think my assumption is that people want to hear about biotech trends from me. And we spend 6 months hammering away on biotech. And then after we're at 40 pieces at this point, and he's just really consistent, he's loving the process, cool, whatever. He, for whatever reason, is, you know what, I'm tired of talking about biotech. I was just at my son's, whatever it was, baseball or soccer game or something. And it made me think about life watching my son out there on the field. And I have some thoughts on life that I'd like to share. And the whole call, this is super unconventional, and everyone in my industry is going to think I'm crazy. I just want to share my thoughts on life. The thing goes crazy viral, does like 250,000 views in the first 12 hours or whatever. And that defining moment, from then on, he's like, I never want to talk about biotech again. I'm all in. This is what I'm writing about. And it's the perfect example of how you approach the thing with this assumption, and you have to wait to see what the market wants from you. So this whole belief that I'm this accomplished person and I want to go get a book deal and I want the PR agency to tell everyone how amazing I am, and it's this massive buildup, and then the book comes out and nobody reads it. It's because you walked into the whole thing assuming everyone wanted X from you, and really everyone wants Y from you. So that first year, when you're first starting, to me, is all about remove anything with friction. Editing, friction. Validating your idea, friction. Feeling like you need to format it perfectly, friction. Anything that has friction, remove it and just focus on output and feedback. And then take all the feedback that you get, learn what your niche is, and then over time, you start going, oh, this is what people really want to hear from me about. So I'm going to spend more time editing those topics. I'm going to spend more time drilling into that. I'm going to research that, because now you know which direction your compass is pointing. So that to me is, if you ignore everything else and just do that, you will be 10 times more successful in the first year than if you sit down and you try and make your first piece this masterpiece, because you have no idea. It's just your own assumption.
God, I love that. It harkens back to the biggest reaction I ever got in my newsletter was when I admitted that I just learned that a pickle and a cucumber were the same thing.
We talked about this. I just learned that too.
Yeah, yeah, I remember. Yeah, we chatted about that at office hours. And I remember thinking that was so funny, because everything else in my newsletter was like me trying to sound smart, basically. But that one dumb little thing ended up getting this huge reaction. And I couldn't help but think of that as you mentioned this biotech CEO who's like, came in with a strong assumption of what the people want to hear and was pleasantly surprised.
Angelo didn't know that either. For all I knew,
Yeah.
pickles were grown in a lake and they just sit in this liquid, and then you go and scoop them out. I didn't know any of this about pickles.
See, this is why we need to just launch a dedicated, at this point, a dedicated blog. This is like
but here's a perfect example, right? Is that the reason why I love this approach is because you now have the ability to make a conscious decision. Now you're not just, I have an assumption and I'm going to write what I want to write about and the chips fall where they may. Now you have a conscious decision. People really gravitated to the fact that you revealed, look, there's whatever, 2-3 people in this chat that didn't know that either. This is game-changing stuff. So now you have the ability to choose, you know what, this is an interesting signal. Maybe I should make my niche. Here are all the things that you didn't know about things in life, right? Or you want to niche down even further. Here's all the things you didn't know about weird food. And data's telling you, hey, there's something about that idea that's interesting. Maybe you should explore that. But whether or not you pursue that idea is fine. It's just now you have now you're conscious about it. And the same thing, I don't know who here keeps up with it. I'm really big into trading and investing, but like when the whole GameStop Robinhood thing happened 2 or 3 weeks ago, okay, I found it fascinating. I was intrinsically interested in it. So I wrote a Twitter thread about an aspect of the story that I felt wasn't getting that much attention. It went crazy viral on Twitter, 500,000 views and impressions, whatever, in 2 days. That doesn't necessarily mean that I want to go pivot and all I want to write about is stocks and trading. But now I know, hey, there's an interesting signal there. Maybe that's worth pursuing, opposed to me just sitting in my apartment thinking to myself, I think I know what people want to hear about from me.
I actually want to interject a question that Yina just asked in the chat, which I think is great, which is maybe with the kind of biotech CEO, the example of the pickle thing, how much of that do you think is attributable maybe to authenticity or someone being real with their voice? Just curious if that you think maybe plays a role with some of these things.
Authenticity is a really difficult word because what is authentic? Like, how do we really truly define that? The way I would define it is I'm intrinsically curious about this thing. And so I think inherently that passion is going to come through a little bit more than if I try and write about something or create something around something I'm not intrinsically curious about. That's it. But I really, when people say, oh, in order to be more effective or in order to build an audience or in order to write content that engages people, you need to be authentic. What does that actually mean? What are you actually saying with that word? And to me, if you're able to think beyond just the surface level, be authentic advice, you're still pointing out like the fundamental frameworks of why people pay attention to the things they pay attention to. Is it a story where they can see themselves in it? And you're giving them something so actionable that they can take away and go, now my life is different. You've given me something. That's one framework. Or the way you've curated this information is so effective. Like, I don't feel like I need to go read 10 articles. I just need to read your one article because you compressed the information in such an effective way. Authenticity is the word people where they don't actually know why it's working. They just label it as they're being authentic and we'll just call it a day. But why it's really working is there's fundamental reasons as to what's hooking the reader.
God, that's a great parsing of that word. So one thing that I'm curious about, and great breakdown and I think distinction there. And it's funny, it's almost like there can be this reverse signal if you worry too much about it. It's almost like the thing you try to optimize for ends up being the thing you screw up.
Let me riff on this. Sorry, I have a great addition.
Please.
Okay. If I sit here and I'm like, hey, you know what? I love playing video games. And since quarantine started, you know what? I started playing World of Warcraft Classic again. And it was amazing. And I'm loving it. And this is great. And here's all the reasons why it's so great in my life. That's authentic. That's actually me. That's actually what I'm doing. But no one cares. That's not offering anything to anyone here because I'm just talking about myself. But the moment that I started playing video games again when the pandemic hit. And here's a handful of really important lessons that has taught me that might help you see your own life in a different way. Now it's not about me, it's about you. And I'm just using my story to give you something to take away. Is authenticity the reason why that works? No, it's not. The underlying foundation, the underlying framework is tell personal story, give actionable advice. That has nothing to do with like, we're authentic and that's build an authentic brand. It's just the most pointless advice ever.
Yes, this is gold. I love your comment there on, I don't know if spin is the word, right? But adding an angle that will actually make it true to the idea while also compelling for other people. I'm curious, like, if there's any other advice or frameworks or tips or whatever you have when maybe you're sitting on an idea that feels like it's played out a million times. If I want to go write about whatever, something to do with productivity, how can I make it distinct from what Tim Ferriss has already written or that sort of thing? Curious if you have any more kind of advice or guidance you give when you're sitting on an idea you like, but maybe don't have a spin on it that's compelling yet.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. Just to address Kyle's question here in the chat, totally agree. Stories can provide value without being explicit about lessons. That's why great novels work, because great novels are about life. And it's not the author sitting there being like, now, when you wake up tomorrow morning, do this at 6 a.m. to have a more productive day. So the like beginner version of this, and this is like how you climb the ladder as to like becoming a better and better writer. The beginner version is, I'm going to tell you a story, and then I'm going to tell you what you should take away from it. I'm going to give you the ending. The advanced version is, I'm going to weave the two together. And then the expert version is, I'm going to tell you a story, and the entire time you're going to listen and you're going to be engaged and you're going to feel like it's helping your life and you're not going to know why. And that, in order to get to that level, you have to understand, why is it working in the first place? So beginner is tell you a story, and here's what you should learn from these 7 tips on productivity. So start there and then build. But the framework question is, if you feel like you have an idea that's been beaten to death, like to me, there's 2 ways of standing out. You either have an original idea or you have an original presentation or formatting of that idea. So what Tim Ferriss did really well, which a lot of people don't seem to talk about or acknowledge, is he was really one of the first. Joe Rogan has done this too. He was really one of the first to go, I'm not going to be the expert. I'm going to curate the experts. And so he didn't have to have an original idea. He changed the presentation of it. He said, it's not going to be about what I think. I'm going to go gather what everyone else thinks. And so if you look at a book like Tools of Titans is the curation of a ton of experts. And then you have a classic book, Think and Grow Rich, or How to Win Friends and Influence People, or whatever, that is that author's unique perspective of that topic. So you could, in theory, in some ways say they're similar ideas, but they're formatted or presented differently. So then you go down the rabbit hole of, what are all the different ways that I can format things? You could take an idea that's presented in a really long prose style format, and you could turn it into a list. That's an easy change. You could take a list and turn it into a massive walkthrough guide with pictures. That's a change. So the way that you present the idea changes how people perceive it. And so a lot of times you notice people think, oh, someone already owns that topic or they already own that domain. But you can change the way that you go about presenting the information. And now all of a sudden there's room for both of you. And then a reader picks, hey, if I really want the long form stuff, I go over here. And if I really want the short form stuff, I go over here. And so that's where, especially if we're talking first year of writing, the easiest place to start is, you don't have to be the expert. You can go curate the experts. And now you're the expert of curating experts in this one specific niche. And then curate a bunch of information, learn, become the master, form your own original ideas, and then move over to, now here are my ideas.
I'm just totally in love with that advice. It's funny. Tim Ferriss talks about the idea of borrowed credibility. And, frankly, with Compound, we're like, 8 months ago when we were getting off the ground, it's like, who cares about our opinion? We're not this established brand that everyone knows about. Let's go ask a bunch of people who do have credible thoughts about writing to come speak on our behalf. And I think it's been a great, just to your point about kind of Tim Ferriss and finding, almost putting the spotlight on others. I think it's been a really great way for us to get a little bit of awareness while promoting the ideas of people who are already established.
And if you really want to get meta about it, realize that those people hire people to curate their own stuff. What does a Gary Vaynerchuk do? Gary Vaynerchuk literally has a team now where he employs people to go out and better curate the content that he creates himself. So I made a podcast video. Now I want you to go curate all the best moments from that podcast video. That's your job. And then I want you to curate all the best one-liners from all my podcast videos and put it on Twitter. That's your job. So you talk about unforged career paths, like the ability to power level yourself by curating someone else's material and proving, hey, I'm a really valuable asset, not just to this person, but to anyone who wants to read about it. Then all of a sudden, everyone goes, I love that person. And you're curating their stuff better than they're curating it themselves. So I also love you. And then if that person doesn't want to hire you, someone else is going to see that and be like, that's awesome. Can you do that for me? I'll pay you to do that. And so all of a sudden, like, you have all these different ways where you can level up as a writer or a creator or whatever. It's amazing. I'm seeing so many examples of it on Twitter right now. It's blowing my mind.
Yeah, there's a great question from Lyle here about how does writing that's more for entertainment fit into this framework? Meaning writing that really is meant to be maybe entertaining before it's necessarily practical or useful.
Okay, so I'm waiting. I have a lot of other things on my list before I go down. I want to take all of these writing principles and then I'm going to go do it in fiction, because then I want to prove how much all of this is overarching and true. Okay. But with entertainment, which you're talking story, film, fiction, novel, whatever it is, people don't read stories just because you wrote the story, which is like a really big bias that writers have, right? Is, hey, I spent a year writing this story. I deserve for people to read what I spent all this time writing. That is not why people read stories. The reason why people read stories, entertainment stories, is because the story is answering a question that they are interested in learning the answer to. Okay, so let's look at what is Harry Potter. Okay, if you ask the average person, why is Harry Potter successful? It's a great story. It's authentic. It's, and it lives up in the fairyland. What's the real reason Harry Potter is successful is it raises an interesting question. What is life like for a teenager that goes to a school for wizards? That's the question. And that question was really interesting to a lot of people. What is school like for teenagers that go to a wizardry school? And so when someone writes a story, they put so much emphasis on, I am writing a story, but they don't ever stop to think, what question am I actually answering? And if no one is interested in your story, you might not be answering that interesting of a question. What's the book about vampires that everyone went crazy for?
Twilight.
Twilight. Okay. I didn't read the book, but what?
Yeah, same. Never even heard of it, but it was a lucky guess.
Incredibly successful book because it raises a question that a lot of people seemed curious to answer. What's it like if you fall in love with a werewolf or whatever it was? All of these frameworks and these tactics, it's a lot easier to explain it in the context of nonfiction. Is like, what question are you answering? If you're answering the same question as everyone else, what's an effective morning routine? There's a gazillion answers to that question, which means if you write about it, your work's not going to stand out because you're not answering a unique and differentiated question. But it's harder. We're going down the rabbit hole a bit. It's harder to explain this in the context of story because people don't think of stories as questions, but that is what they are. And if you want proof of that, go spend 30 minutes reading random answers on Quora, and you'll see all the highest performing best answers on Quora are stories, and the story is answering the question, which brings us back to tell a personal story, give actionable advice, beginner's version.
Yeah, I've got like a mountain of notes. This is just pure gold. Wow, this is great. I'm tempted to just stay on this theme, but I will push this along because actually, I think this feeds nicely into something I think you published this morning about, which is how to take a piece of writing, in your case, maybe like an atomic essay or maybe a shorter form piece of writing, and to republish and redistribute it across different channels to basically maximize its reach and just maximize its probability of catching on. So maybe I'll leave this one a bit open-ended, but I'm curious what big ideas from that thread and some of the advice you shared this morning might be worth bringing up now.
So this is, bro, we're flowing. This is like when you see, it's like they bring the artist into the booth and the freestyle just goes on for 40 minutes straight. And you're like, whoo, like we're flowing. This is great. So the old way of distributing written content was you write on one platform and then you take that link and you share that link on a bunch of different platforms. So I write a blog post and then I take the link and I share the link on Facebook, and then I share the link on Twitter, and I share the link on LinkedIn, and I go, hey, everyone, come over here and read my blog. That was the old way of doing it. The new way of doing it, and the way that I've been evangelizing for the past however many years, is that every single platform is its own world. It is, it's like Star Wars. They get in the ship and they fly to Tatooine and then they fly somewhere else. Like each platform is its own world. What you don't want to do is you don't want to show up to the world and go, hey, everyone who loves spending time on this world, why don't you all pack your bags, come on the ship with me, and let's fly back to where I came from. And now you should read my stuff. That makes no sense. No one wants to do that. So the new way of doing it is you take the content and you bring it to the world, and then you put it in that world's context. So for example, I write an atomic essay for Ship 30 for 30. Okay. So we have a writing template that we give everyone. It's in Figma. That's where I do the writing. When I'm finished with that, I post it on Twitter. I don't post a link to anything. I'm posting the actual thing on Twitter, and I'm turning my article then into a Twitter thread. It is native to Twitter. That is how people read on Twitter. I'm not asking anyone to leave that platform. Then I take the exact same text and I go find a relevant question on Quora. So this morning or yesterday or whatever, I'm writing about effective writing habits. I go search on Quora, what questions are people asking about how to build effective writing habits? I take what I wrote, I publish it as an answer to the question on Quora. Now it's native to Quora. I'm not asking anyone to go anywhere. They can discover it there. Then I copy paste the same text there and I bring it to Medium. And I go, hey, everyone that loves reading on Medium, I'm not giving you a link to leave. Here's the article on Medium. Then I go do the same thing on LinkedIn. And the thing about all of these worlds is that they're all unique and separate. People like being there. So no one wants to leave. So give them the thing there. Now, the big question that everyone asks here is, doesn't that ruin your SEO? And my answer is, you're not playing the SEO game. Okay. So let's say you love writing about productivity, hot topic, whatever. You love writing about productivity tips. Okay. You are never, ever going to beat a productivity-based software company that just raised $50 million with a 30-person content marketing team, or an agency that is doing content marketing for them or whatever, for productivity related keywords on Google. You're never going to win because that's the game that they're playing. And how SEO actually works, how Google determines what is on the front page, is it's not just how good is the content, it's how many other sites are pointing to that content and they say, hey, this is the most credible, you should put this at the top. How do you do that? All these startups and companies and whatever, they go out, they hire an SEO firm and they go, we're going to spend anywhere from $5,000 to $1 million a month. And we're going to go pay other sites to link back to that page because we want to rank first on Google. Why do we want to rank first on Google? Because that search volume to us converts to customers and we see that clear ROI. That is the game they're playing. That is not your game. You are never going to win, so don't even bother playing the game. Instead, go tap into all these other worlds. Let them have Google. Like, Google isn't the only world. There's 300 million people on Quora. There's 650 million whatever on Twitter. So go bring the content to that world, post it natively there, and you're still not going to reach 1% of all the people that you can reach there. So it's not like you're missing anything. So my whole, like, the easiest way to 10x your reach is pick one platform that is your primary. For me, that was Quora. All I did was write on Quora for 4 years. I didn't care about being anywhere else. Make that your primary. And then if you have the time, if you have the energy, if you just want to like get more mileage out of the thing that you wrote, just copy paste it to all these other native platforms where there are already users and you can post articles. So that's the best ones: Quora, Medium, LinkedIn, Twitter. And if all you do, if say you're averaging 100 views on one platform, and then you start copy pasting it, and even if you're only averaging 100 views on each one, well, you just 4 or 5x to your reach by doing nothing. So it's just, a lot of people don't know you can do that. There's this whole SEO argument that makes absolutely no sense. People think, oh, I wrote this on one platform and I'm going to break the rules if I put it somewhere else. All of this is allowed. I've been doing it for a decade. It's your content. Go to town with it. Chop it up, copy paste it, do whatever you want with it. But I would still encourage, come back to one platform. Have your primary and then copy paste from there.
Oh my God, this is so good. The next thing I was going to ask you, and maybe, well, I won't lead you here, but the next thing I was going to ask you is like, how would you advise people to pick their platform? You found a lot of success on Quora and really focused there initially. How would you maybe encourage people who are like, I don't really know, am I good? Am I going to be good at Twitter? Am I going to be better on LinkedIn? What kind of advice would you give people making that decision?
Yeah, I have an awesome riff on your question, by the way, or not question, the thing you just put in the chat. I'll touch on in 1 second, but yeah, like the platform, if you're really in the weeds, like I'm looking at this stuff every day and I'm always testing stuff. So for me, the primary kind of changes every 6 months to a year, depending on what's happening. Like right now, Twitter's reach is incredible. 3 years ago, you couldn't have paid me enough to write on Twitter because the platform wasn't as good. But right now it's crushing it. And I'm getting like a couple million impressions a month on my content. That's amazing. In 2014 to 2018, it was Quora. And I was screaming from the rooftops, if you're not writing on Quora, you are missing the single greatest writing opportunity on the internet right now. The thing is, each of these platforms, you have to remember, they are startups and companies. They are going through their own journey and life cycle. So some are going to be better than others at different parts of the journey. Like Medium right now is in another just like slog. Like I hate Medium, but a year ago, I was like, Medium's the best thing ever. And maybe a year from now, I'll come back and go, Medium's the best thing ever again. I think, especially when you're first starting out, it's like everyone wants the growth hack. Everyone wants the shortcut. Everyone wants whatever, but you'll be so much more effective if you just pick one and stick with it. It almost doesn't matter. Just pick one and stick with it. Those are the big four. I would encourage LinkedIn last just because its distribution is the weakest. But even if all you did was write on LinkedIn, you can still be effective there. And then if you really want to diversify, then copy paste across the board. KDP is Amazon's self-publishing platform, which also you have writers that they don't write on Medium or Quora or LinkedIn or Twitter or anything. And literally all they do is just put out self-published books on Amazon. Technically, that's a platform. That's a different game, but that works. The thing I want to riff on that you said, Yina, is everything comes back to answering a question. I fundamentally believe that is true. And what I explain to people is, it's if you ask someone, how do I get distribution on my thing? What they say is, I wrote this thing. Now, how do I get 1 million people to read it? Okay, it's like this outward facing, I did this. Now, how do I bring it to 1 million people? And what Quora taught me is that you should flip that. What you really should be asking and what you should start with is, the size of the question dictates the size of the audience. So let me explain what that means. Okay, so if I wake up in the morning and I ask myself, what's new in the world of biotech and science? That is a much smaller question than I wake up in the morning and I ask, how can I be happy? How can I make more money? How do I know if I'm in love? Those are big questions. And so it's almost like you're setting yourself up to fail if you write this thing and then you go, now, how do I get 1 million people to pay attention to it? Because the question that you're answering, 1 million people might not have that question. And so instead, start in reverse and go, hey, this is a really big, important question that a lot of people are asking themselves. I'm going to write the answer to it. And it doesn't always need to be, I need the big questions. It doesn't have to be the what is the purpose of life question. Like for me, if I look at in the space of online writing, I notice that a lot of people are all asking me, how do I distribute my content? Then I know if I write a really great quote unquote answer to that question, a lot of people that come across that question are going to want to read that. So when you start in reverse, all of a sudden now you're not sitting in your room being like, what's a good idea? What should I write about? Instead, you start with the question, what do people want to know? And that the same holds true for stories. Like what sort of movies do people want to watch? Think about all the best documentaries or like murder mysteries or whatever. Those are questions. How did this person kill 12 people and bury them in their basement? That's a question. Do a lot of people have that question? Yes, cool. Let's go make a documentary about it. So I really feel like so much of this is 10 years of just like trying things and learning in the trenches, but it's all about how are you thinking about it? And this idea that you just sit in your room and you come up with an idea and you springboard it into the world and everything just magically happens from there. You have to think below that. What's the next layer? How does this actually work?
It's funny. I have to ask because some of what you said there, actually, a lot of what you said, I think has been great challenges to a lot of common memes, if you will, right now. But specifically with that, you just implied try to ask questions that more people will relate to or have, which intuitively it runs counter to the advice of pick a very specific niche and start there. What are your opinions on starting really narrow and then expanding outwards later and just generally, quote unquote, finding your niche?
Yeah, think about what you just said. And I'm not saying like you're saying it, but that advice, right? Start narrow. You are still starting with an assumption. Narrow what? You're the one who's sitting there deciding what is narrow. And again, like for the first 4 years of me writing on Quora, like I wrote any question that appealed to my interests. I wrote about gaming. I wrote about marketing. I wrote about fitness. I wrote about writing. I wrote about life. I wrote about whatever. And then after 4 years, I realized, hey, these are the top 3 buckets that everyone really likes reading things about from me. So I'm going to double down on those. Or I notice when I write about life, this is actually something I've noticed. If I write about life advice, my content always performs really well and it goes the farthest. I get the most views, but the engagement in the readership isn't as sticky. It appeals to the most people, but there's not a lot of loyalty there. Whereas when I write about online writing or I write about these frameworks, smaller audience, but super sticky, super engaged. So as I learn that, my expectations change. I'm like, hey, I want to write about life. And you know what? I bet it's going to do 250,000 views in a day. And I also bet that a lot of the comments are going to be surface level being like, this was really interesting. Thanks. Whereas I'm going to write a really detailed, in-depth, here's how to think about distributing content online article, and only 30,000 people are going to read it. But I'm going to get emails from writers who are like, yo, that blew my mind. Yes, this is awesome. So I'm repeating at this point, but start with a niche. Again, be authentic. What does that actually mean? What are you actually saying?
Oh my God, this is just fantastic. I did want to bring in a question that Kyle had. And by the way, we'll just go ahead and merge, if it's not already obvious, the Q&A and the interview. I'll be our intermediary here.
I've been reading it too. So yeah.
I know. You've been great about picking some up. And the one I wanted to inject from Kyle was what kind of pushed you to publish books like crazy last year? Because talk about a medium that I think most people from the outside would be like, why write a book? Why not just invest all that time in your Substack or writing tweet threads, et cetera? Why invest the time doing a lot of book publishing on Kindle?
So this I will admit the book side this is my science experiment in progress. So I will have more to share here in the next 5 years. But this is going to go down a whole rabbit hole of making money as a writer and publishing deals and all of that. But if you go and look at who are all the most successful writers of all time, they all share one thing in common. And all of them have a massive library of books. They all have James Patterson, 97 books, whatever it is. Stephen King, 80 books, a gazillion short stories, volume. And so what's interesting is they came from a different time period. Like the concept of self-publishing when Stephen King was 30 years old didn't really exist. But you think about what is a Stephen King or a James Patterson or even like a James Clear. He's probably going to, I don't know that he's in the book business. I think he's going to go a different route. But what does that person look like in the context of today? The biggest difference is you either own what you create or you keep going down the old path of I'm going to take my advance and I'm going to go to the publishing house. And a lot of people are just, I have a bestseller and I make $1 million off of it. That's cool. And I would agree until that you made $1 million, but your publisher made 10 million. Then you're sitting there being like, well, I actually would have liked the bigger house with the bigger pool with the lobster for dinner. So for me with books, the opportunity that I see is if you cultivate the skill of writing consistently and being able to produce volume, doing that in articles is great, but articles are really hard to monetize. Like articles don't really, like I've written 4,000 articles on the internet and I've gotten paid $0 direct dollars from it, but they've built me credibility, allowed me to build a business, brought me into ghostwriting. There's all these tangential benefits. But if you bring that volume to the world of books and you actually get really good at understanding what questions are people willing to pay to acquire an answer to, which is what a book is, and can you do that in volume, and can you invest your own resources? Like with my art and business of online writing book, I invested whatever it was, $3,000, $4,000 in designing a cover and formatting it and presenting it in a professional way. If you can do that at scale and become your own publisher, all it really takes is one breakout book. And then all of a sudden your entire library, the average goes up and everyone goes, well, I love that book. Now I want to buy the rest. And if you're the owner of your IP, all of a sudden the math on that gets pretty crazy. What does James Patterson look like in 2021 if he owns 100% of his novels? Dude's worth $900 million. And that's with the old publishing deal. Like that's with him still paying his publisher. So what does that look like if you're James Patterson and you practice your craft over 40 years? You're not going to be worth 900 million. You're going to be worth a couple billion. And that's a really compelling, I don't know, that to me, I'm curious. I want to go on that journey. What does that look like? Yeah, but it takes time, right? Like I put out 4 or 5 books last year. Some were poetry, some were nonfiction, some were about writing, whatever, because I have a lot of interest and that's cool. But by the time that I'm done here on Earth, I hope that my library is massive and hopefully 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 out of 150 blow up and perform really well. And then that brings the average of the whole thing up and you own all of it.
I'm just like, it's just amazing traditional publishers still exist. And that's a little hyperbolic, but
I think they exist for a different type of person. I've come to realize I have very strong opinions on this stuff, but like they exist for the person that doesn't want to take personal accountability over it, which is fine. Like I'm really entrepreneurial. So for me, I'd rather learn the skills and invest my own money and take the risk because I want to experience the disproportionate reward. That's my personality. There's a lot of other people that go, look, I'm never going to do that. I don't care about that. I'm too busy. I'm not motivated enough. And I just want the book deal because I want credibility and I want to use it as a business card. And I don't have all those other skills and I have no interest in acquiring them. Great. Give up 85% of your product and go let the publishing house do it. But like the concept, like I've built a company before, like the concept of giving away 85% or 90% of my startup for a little bit of seed funding that doesn't even cover effective marketing it's insulting. Like I would never do it. So It just depends on where do you sit on the entrepreneurship spectrum.
100%. And it's funny, the one question I was going to ask you maybe goes without saying, but honestly, that's an assumption to our narrative for this conversation. Do you, in your opinion, need that existing audience for book publishing to be a route that's even worth considering? Or have you seen people succeed maybe without having big email list, big Twitter following, et cetera?
The only way it works as the latter is if you walk into it going, I'm going to play the self-publishing game the same way that writers play the Medium game or the Twitter game or whatever. Like, you're either building an audience elsewhere and then driving them to a book or a course or a product or whatever it is, or you're walking into Amazon and you're saying, I am going to self-publish a book every 1 month to 3 months. The fiction writers on Amazon that play this game are crazy. I'm not saying they're the best books in the world, but they're churning out a fiction series every month or two. You have to be aware that that's a new game that they're playing. So you're either walking into it going, I'm going to write 100 books and that's my game. The same way that I walked into Quora and was like, I'm going to write 1,000 answers. Like, we're playing the volume game. Or you're going to build up an audience elsewhere and you're going to direct them to then your product. I write about writing. Hey, I wrote a book about online writing. Go check it out. So I think it's more likely that people do the former. You build an audience and then you direct them to a book. That's the whole purpose of writing online for a lot of people. But the second way is possible. Just realize, again, what game are you playing? You're going to need to write a lot of self-published books in order to start seeing this is meaningful, but it can work.
Incredible. God, this time has flown by. I can't believe we're almost down to our last 5 minutes here. Yeah, let me actually pull Yina's question here, which is, what's a current question you're struggling to find an answer to? Maybe this book one was one of them, but I'm curious, what else?
What's a question that I see an opportunity to answer?
Yeah, feel free to unmute if there's any context you want to add.
Oh, yeah. Well, first, thanks so much again for everything that you've been sharing. I've just been like writing pages of notes. But yeah, I think the main question was just really, what's an interesting question you found that maybe you haven't found a good answer to? It could be anything, being like, why do pickles come from cucumbers? It could be a question like that. Or it could just be just like any question that's piqued your curiosity. I just wanted to get an understanding more about like how you think and what are some questions that really you find interesting.
Most recently, I've become really interested in investing in the past maybe 2 years. So questions that I'm always asking are like, why did companies get the funding that they got? Or why did a stock do what it did? But yeah, the questions are out there everywhere. At a certain point now, it's almost like the burden of opportunity. Like, I keep a folder or a note on my phone where I'm always writing down book titles or article ideas or whatever. And as you move along, it almost becomes more of a game of, which ideas do you really think are worth pursuing? Like, you start to realize, like, I've already come to the somber realization that I will never write all the things that I am aware that I could write in my lifetime. There's just too much. When you become aware of it, you're overwhelmed. And so it's funny, in the beginning, people are like, what happens if you run out of things to write about? As you start paying attention to these things and you're looking at questions, you will never run out of things to write about. And so as you move along, it becomes the opposite question. I have too much to write about. How do I decide which ideas are worth pursuing and worth investing time and energy and effort and money into? And then how do I learn how to ignore the ones that, it'd be cool, be great if I answered that question, be great if I wrote that thing, but is that really going to get me further in the direction that I want to go?
Love it. Yeah, 5 minutes on the clock. I guess the one question I just have to ask, even though I know we haven't, gone that deep into it so far in the conversation, is how do you write so much? What is some advice for helping to get more volume and output for someone who maybe just struggles to have the degree of output and be as prolific as I think you've been? What sort of advice would you give people on really developing that foundation of basically production?
On the simplest level, it's practice, right? Like it's like going to the gym. The first time you go to the gym, 20 minutes in, you're huffing and puffing and you're like, Jesus, get me out of here. But then after you do it for a handful of years, like when I was bodybuilding, I got to the point where I'd be in the gym doing hardcore stuff for 4 hours and I'd still be like, I love it. I don't want to leave. I'm good. So it's part of just one of those things you build up over time. But a really actionable thing that I can share is I've learned how much switching context, switching what you're writing about and how you're thinking, every time you switch, that throws your brain into a somersault. It's really hard to change your context. So for example, I still ghostwrite for a handful of people, and there are a lot of days where I will write for 2 or 3 other people plus myself. So that's 4 different voices in one day. And I will do that 5 days a week. And so what I've learned is that to keep myself from feeling really strained and feeling, oh, this person is in biotech and I have to orient myself in that industry. And then this person's writing about life advice or like feminism or some completely different other thing. Every time I switch contexts, it's exhausting. So what I'll try and do is I'll batch topics together where I'm like, hey, these 2 people are both kind of writing life advice stuff. Their voices are similar. I'm going to do both of those back to back because that's one context. Or some mornings, if I'm really flowing on writing about writing or whatever I'm jamming about, if I'm in that flow and that context is really just hitting me, I will do everything possible not to switch that context. Because the moment that then I try and go read about or write something totally different, now I have to reorient myself. Elon Musk talks about this all the time. He's like, context switching is the killer of productivity. So I would really encourage, try and batch your topics together so that you're not always, wait, what are the new rules of this game? How do I, because that's where it takes 20 minutes to be like, you have to orient yourself.
Amazing advice. Whew. God, 2 minutes. Oh man, what's the buzzer beater question? What question have I not asked that you wish more people would ask you about?
Dude, where do baby corns come from? I'm dead serious. Every time I order Thai food, there's baby corns in there. And what is the difference? I've never known. What is the difference between a real corn and a baby corn? And how is it like donuts? Like where you poke the donut out the middle and that's how you get the munchkins? Like, how does this work?
This is now a question for the group. Does anyone have the answer to this? Is there anyone more familiar with?
I'm gonna laugh so hard and be mind blown if no one else here knows where baby corns come from.
Yeah, they take big corn and shrink them down.
Is that serious, dude?
No, I'm shitting you. That's a joke.
Okay, because I'm gonna do another podcast in 2 hours here, and I'm gonna get on that. And I'm gonna tell everyone, hey, I just learned that actually they take corns and they put them in a device and it shrinks them down. And then next thing we're gonna have a fake news problem.
That's right. It's Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, but for corn. Amazing. That is just spectacular. Wow. Talk about a question that needs to be answered. Okay, we do have some Wikipedia entries coming into the chat now.
Baby corn. Okay, can we all just enlighten ourselves here?
Okay, so it's actual corn. It's just
harvested early. Okay.
Baby carrots. Is that a simpler process? Is that just a normal carrot cut down?
Baby carrots, I know actually, because it's a really interesting story. In all of the carrot mills, the baby carrots were all like the extra pieces that they would throw away. And some guy came along and was like, hey, if we turn these in new category, it's not a carrot, it's a baby carrot. New category creates baby carrots. That booms as an industry. Incredible stuff.
Absolutely love that. So there's always the positioning expert who sees an opportunity where someone else sees waste.
It's terrific.
Oh my God. This was a blast. This was such a fun conversation. We're right at the hour, so I'll keep us to time. But Nicolas, I just want to first and foremost thank you for joining us.
No, thanks for having me. I love stuff like this. And we got to dig into some like nitty gritty stuff. So that to me is always fun. So if we ever want to do it again, I'm always game.
Amazing. Yeah, that's a deal. And thanks everyone for joining. Love the questions. This was definitely just a superb session. So recording will come out shortly, and we'll also do a summary blog post with some takeaways. Nicolas, until next time, thanks for joining.
Cool. Enjoy the day, everyone.
Awesome. See you, everybody.
See you.